Well, certainly not the Sunday we were hoping for, we were expecting, that we wanted. Tough one for your 2024 Las Vegas Raiders as they fall 36-22 in a game that candidly was not that close to the Carolina Panthers. Eddie Paskal hanging out with my man Jason Fitz in the fifth quarter, presented by Twitch. Okay, Fitz. Where to even really begin? I know what I think about the game. You and I were texting throughout the course of the game this afternoon. Tough. Major takeaway for our pal Fitz. What do you got?
Can't come out flat. And I think the hardest part is, look, I've said this repeatedly. We as fans know this feeling. How many fans listening right now will remember what it's felt like over the last couple of years to lose to a backup quarterback that was suddenly coming in with a bad football team, and the whole world says you got this game, and the team just comes out and doesn't have it. The problem is, with this particular organization, this particular year, this particular team, none of that matters. There's so many different people on the staff. There's so many different people on the roster. But you got to get an answer to that right now. And if you're Antonio Pierce, the head coach, you got to walk into the locker room and you got to figure out a way to charge that right now. And I think it's an interesting stat that today I saw, Dan Campbell and the Lions pulled off a win, and the significance of their win was that it is the ninth consecutive win that they have after a loss. The whole concept being don't lose two in a row. If you're Antonio Pierce right now, I can only imagine that you are absolutely taking a bite out of a lot of people's butts in the organization, because I thought the level of concentration and focus and effort and energy, the things we've talked about that have been so good under Antonio Pierce, none of that was on display today.
Yeah, and I think to AP's credit, right, he did not mince words after this game. I mean, his post-game comments were direct, they were harsh, they were unfiltered, they were very raw and authentic, as we have come to expect from the head coach of the Silver and Black. But he goes, look, man, there were guys out there that were making business decisions, and he goes, and we as a coaching staff, we're going to have to make some business decisions going forward too. And he did not mince words about the effort. He didn't like the effort. He was asked, hey, are there any positives? And he cut the reporter off. He goes, no, there were no positives from today. And candidly, when you go and you have the home opener and you let 26 points unanswered to an offense that has struggled to find any type of rhythm, any type of anything through 2 weeks. Right? It is hard to find any positives in that. And I don't think that we should sit here and try to pretend like it's all, rainbows and puppies and all that. I mean, the only thing I would caution everyone is this is one game. It's 1 of 18 or 1 of 17. But, it is one game. It's a really bad day at the office. But to your point, Fitz, I think that how we see AP and this group bounce back is going to tell us a lot more about what we're going to see from the 2024 Raiders than maybe this one afternoon did.
Look, it was obvious that this defense didn't have the same level of fire, even in the way they celebrated after the big plays. They didn't have the same level of fire. There were so many people that we have learned to rely on the defensive side of the ball. I thought, frankly, there were times in this game where I didn't know what Nate Hobbs was trying to do. They had receivers running by him, and that we're not used to seeing that, right? You saw how many crossing routes today where Andy Dalton hit him in stride, and guys couldn't even find a way to tackle him. It was like watching Bo Jackson and Tecmo Bowl back in the 80s. You couldn't find a way to tackle the guys. You had guys that were a little out of position. You had missed tackles all over the place. It felt like alignment issues. And on top of all of that, you didn't have the usual Energizer Bunny charge that you would get from Max Crosby. Fair, has been, reported everywhere that he's battling an injury. Weren't even sure if he was going to be able to play in this game. And I love that he gave a gutsy effort, but it just didn't feel like, without that pop of energy, it didn't feel like anybody else knew how to find the lift.
Yeah, and I think for me, Fitz, and sticking with Max for a second, right? I mean, look, we have seen time and time again just how much it's going to take to get this dude off the field. And the fact that the second offensive series, or I guess second defensive series for the Raiders in this case, right? Max starts on the sideline, right? Clearly on some sort of pitch count, on some sort of, let's try to limit him on the field and kind of get the most that we can out of his reps. That alone tells you kind of that this is a dude who's not rocking at 100%. I think for me, Fitz, the big kind of moment that I kind of look to my friends in the press box to my left and my right, I say, it feels a little different. Is Max had that tackle for a loss, I want to say like a second quarter, and we didn't even get a celebration from him, right? Like you could just tell he was so gassed, he was battling, he was fighting through whatever he's fighting through. And we've grown so accustomed to those great, yelling, emotional feed off the crowd celebrations from Max. And he didn't have it today. And that's not an indictment on him. That's reality, right? This is a war of attrition in the NFL. And there are going to be days, and you and I have talked about this. We've talked about it all offseason. We've certainly talked about it the past couple of weeks. There are going to be days in 2024 where the Raiders defense just doesn't have their fastball. And we said, in order for the Raiders to be successful, in order for them to be competitive, there are going to be a few days where you're going to have the offense and they're going to need to pick up the defense. Today was one of those days. And give credit to Andy Dalton, who becomes the first NFL quarterback in 2024 to go 300 or north of 300 yards with 3 touchdowns, which is insanity in and of itself. But we didn't get that response from the Raiders offense today, did we, Fitz?
No, there was so little happen there. And I feel like every time we talk, it's the same thing. Can't run the football. And there's a weird thing happening right now, I think, with Gardner Minshew, frankly, where when Gardner drops back and starts to feel the pressure and feel the ghost, he's dropping his body a little bit and then climbing back up into the pocket. But he's doing it in a way that just doesn't allow him to even keep his eyes downfield. So by the time guys are coming open, I don't even know. It's just so much he's anticipating the hits that are about to come. And that just tells you a lot about sort of what still has to happen for this team, for the offensive line to gel together, for the quarterback to be comfortable feeling like he can drop back and not having to worry about getting absolutely slaughtered when he does. You know, you saw Devontae drop a couple of balls that's very uncustomary over the course of today. And yet again, can't run the football. So a one-dimensional team, in the sense that the defense has really been everything for the Raiders, is now completely one-dimensional on the offensive side of the ball because they just can't get any push up front. And, you know, I think I share sort of an honest moment for all of us. 3rd and 2, 4th and 2, you cannot tell me you don't dread that down and distance, and you shouldn't. Usually you look at it and say 3rd and 2, this is easy. We just got to move the file, and if we have to, we'll go for it on 4th. There's nothing automatic about 2 or 3 yards for this offense, and that's just a suffocating feeling in modern football. And, you know, to your point, you got to be complimentary. If your defense isn't bringing it and your offense can't get any of those converted, that's why this whole game felt, even when it was 14-7, it felt like it was teetering on the edge of disaster every single drive.
And you and I have talked about this a lot. And AP has talked about it. Lugetzi has talked about it. The importance of balance for this Raiders offense, right? Like, we knew going into 2024, right? Like, we were not looking at, the reincarnation of, the Showtime Lakers in football, right? We were not looking at an offense built like the Kansas City Chiefs. You were looking at an offense predicated on being able to run the ball, control the line of scrimmage, get your tight ends, both of them, involved pretty heavily, and kind of take your shots when the opportunity rises. But the key word to that, kind of the thesis of all of it, is balance. And we look at the breakdown today, Fitz. The Raiders ran the ball 16 times. Gardner Minshew, the combination, I should say, of Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell threw the ball 40 times, right? That is not the recipe. That is not the balance. And I wonder, though, at some point, we're 3 weeks into this thing, and the Raiders have not effectively run the ball once yet. And look, I know that we can't live in this kind of reality or this false reality of, hey, just let Gardner drop back and throw 55 times. But, like, at some point, do you have to look at making some sort of fundamental philosophical pivot to what's not working offensively?
I think so. In fact, I was really surprised. If you look at the beginning of the second half, the Raiders came out and ran the ball a couple of times. And I just looked at it and thought, man, I know you don't want to be one-dimensional, but what if you don't have a choice, right? Because, like, realistically, what you don't want to do is put this passing offense in 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, and that's what's happening. You know, as daunting as it is to say I'm going to abandon the run, what you end up with when you constantly have 2nd and 8, 3rd and 7, you're putting yourself in a situation with routes that take a long time to develop and a pocket that I'm not sure they can really trust that. The ball wasn't coming out on time in that process either. So it just makes everything more difficult. Like, was there ever a time today that you were watching the press box and you thought, you know what? This just looks really easy for the offense right now. We got that in the 4th quarter against the Ravens when we really sort of saw the team dial into Devontae and Brock. But the fact that there was only one target for Devontae and Brock for the majority of the first half total was just, it just showed you that this game got away from the Raiders early when it came to play calling, when it came to selection, when it came to execution of it. They just couldn't get out of their own way.
Well, I mean, to zoom out a little bit, Fitz, right? You talk about, hey, does it look easy? Does it look in rhythm? I mean, now through 3 games, which is what, 6, 12, 180 minutes of football, it's looked easy for this offense for 12 minutes. For 12 minutes and 11 seconds in the 4th quarter last week. That is the only extended, air quotes, kind of piece of quality offensive in-rhythm football that we've seen. And so now you kind of sit there, you're scratching your head, and you're like, okay, well, what was this group able to bottle for those 12 minutes that just hasn't worked or hasn't materialized or hasn't shown up in any type of sustainable way for the vast majority of the rest of the time this team's been on the field?
Yeah, getting rid of the ball quickly to your 2 best weapons and just, pitch and catch. And that's, at some point, I heard a commentator talking about the Cowboys today and the fact that they were gashed by the running game. And the commentator said, look, at this point, Cowboys are going to be who they're going to be all year. They will not be able to fix this. They're not going to be able to acquire the people that will fix their problem stopping the run. And it made me really think about this offense as I was sitting there inside of applying that Cowboys lesson to the Vegas Raiders. Let's be real. I mean, if we believe that the offensive line isn't playing well enough, and I've talked to some former players that played in the league to have them look at it, and they all agree that there are issues with this offensive line. If we agree that there are issues there, I don't know what's going to fix that quickly. I don't know if anything's going to fix that through the course of the year. So now you sort of have to look around and say, well, I know what we thought we were going to do, but that doesn't really matter. We need to win football games. And so I wonder if you're right. Do you have to essentially become a spread offense that the only running attack you have are really delay runs that come out of shotgun, out of spread, and you just hope that you can sort of mask the deficiencies you're having up front to make it work? But if you're Luke Getsy, that's just not the way you've ever run your offenses. That's not who you are. So now all of a sudden you're putting somebody in a situation where they're being asked to execute that offense that may not be what they're even comfortable calling. So these are the things that I think that are so difficult about in-season fixes for this. And realistically, there's a problem up front. There's a problem with the timing in the passing game. There's a problem with, keeping Gardner upright. And there's a massive, biggest problem this whole team has with the inability to simply get 3 or 4 yards of rush. And I don't know if there's anything that actually fixes that right now.
Yeah, and look, I think hopefully when all is said and done, when we look back on 2024, like you kind of look at this game as an outlier, right? I mean, you and I were talking about before we started rolling where the Raiders under Antonio Pierce have, even in their losses, right, even when they don't have their fastball, like we were talking about earlier, they play scrappy. They're not going to get blown out. They're going to play with effort. They're going to play with heart. They might not be the most talented 53 guys or 47 on a game day, but man, they're going to give you everything they got. They're not going to be outworked. And today, we didn't see that either. So I think now the Raiders you got to sit back, you got to look in the mirror, and say, what happened today, right? And I think it's so easy. And look, give Andy Dalton credit, all the credit in the world for going out and doing his thing and putting together a really nice football game. But at some point, you got to look back and say, okay, what happened in a big picture way? What happened today, and how do we get better? Because I think now you have a Cleveland Browns team coming in, and if you want to get back to 500, like you got to figure out a way to kind of clean this up quick, fast, in a hurry.
Yeah, 1-3 versus 2-2 is a massive
big difference.
I mean, it's the hole you bury yourself in this AFC. If you go 1-3, is virtually insurmountable. But let's be honest. I mean, again, we'll look at the rest of the body of work. As bad as the Broncos have looked, was as good as the Broncos look today, right? This is a week-to-week league. So I don't know that most teams in the league are either great or terrible. Most teams in the league are somewhere in between. And when you're somewhere in between, that means you have some good weeks and some bad weeks, right? And so if you're the Raiders, you got to look around and say, okay, like the sky is not falling. We're not stuck. The season's not over. But my God, like you have to figure out how to fix what's fixable here. And what is fixable is the level of fire, right? The level, because you're right, like the explosive, emotional, energetic output that comes from this team is what I think of when I think of Antonio Pierce. And that's a part of this that you have to match. The one controllable, the variable that you can control in any situation in life and in football is what you bring to the table with your attitude and your energy. This team didn't have that this time. So now if you're AP, you got to look around and say, okay, is it a matter of getting different personalities on the field that are in the locker room? Is it a matter of finding a different spark plug? Because let's look at the difference. Like Carolina looked terrible last week. They changed quarterbacks. Their entire team played with a different energy. I'm not saying that change the quarterback here is the answer, but I am saying that look up and down the roster and say, okay, if this guy isn't making us better with their energy and their output and their work, then we got to put somebody else on the field and just give it a try, because you can't go to 1-3 and feel good about your season.
No, certainly not. And again, like we said from the jump, like AP was it's hard to be much more clear. It's hard to be much more direct than he was when he said, we as a coaching staff are now going to have to start making business decisions too. And I mean, very rarely, very seldom do you hear a head coach, even after a loss, right? Even after a tough day at the office, speak that powerfully, that directly, that purposefully about things that need to get better. And look, AP was right, man, and I did appreciate the fact that he said there's really no positives to come out of today, right? Even Daniel Carlson misses a field goal. It was a bizarre kind of, set of circumstances for the Raiders today. But like going forward now, because I think that's what this team has to do. You have to look forward. Like, yes, you have your 24-hour rule like AP talks about where you're going to feel this one, you're going to wear this one. But when these guys get back to work on Tuesday, like, what does this look like? How does this get better? So now, Fitz, as we prepare to welcome in the Cleveland Browns a week from today, still at Allegiant Stadium, and I'm glad that AP did this in his postgame, where he shouted at the fan base, because that was about as an electric of environment as I've heard for I guess technically late September at Allegiant in a really long time. Like, that place was jumping. The fans did their job, and AP made sure to call him out and give him credit for it. But like, now coming back home, like, what is in the world of feasible? What is in the world of reasonable expectation, Fitz, to get better in 7 calendar days?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with this is you got to acknowledge who the Browns are when you get them. They have a absolutely amazing defense. They have a defensive line with a scary player. Sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
They've got a defense that can absolutely just destroy your game plan. They got game records at different levels on the defensive side of the ball. And Myles Garrett is a defensive player of the year candidate every year for a reason, right? So now you're really going to have to, step number one, you're going to have to figure out how to max protect. And I believe that. I don't believe that you can plan on going, I'm going to put my best up front against their best up front and survive that. You can't. So now you're going to be asking basically Michael Mayer to step in and really help. You're going to be asking your backs to help, to chip, to keep things going. And then you're going to have to figure out a way to utilize the very same types of slants that we saw utilized against this Raiders team. You're going to have to utilize. You're going to have to figure out how to get the screen game going. You're going to have to figure out how to do things to disrupt the other defensive line, because I don't think that this Raiders offensive line, as it's currently built, can compete just straight up man-to-man against what they're going to see in Cleveland. And then on the other side of the ball, you've got Deshaun Watson, who's not good. I mean, Deshaun Watson is playing terrible football right now. And Amari Cooper, who can't separate at this point, but can absolutely catch anything, had a killer game. So you know you're going to get the best of Amari. So you need your defensive secondary to sticky up. Like the cushion today on some of these routes was just, it made no sense to me. I don't know why guys were playing so far off and guys weren't challenging at the line. I don't think you can beat Cleveland that way. So it's really going to take a locked and loaded effort from everybody to beat this Browns team, who I think is beatable. But, man, not with the effort we saw today. If you play the way you played in the fourth quarter against the Ravens, you beat Cleveland. If you play the way that you played today, I'm not sure you beat a junior college.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, too, where we talked about that offensive line, we haven't even brought it up, the fact that Thayer Munford not able to finish the day today. So we get a majority of Sunday with DJ Glaze at right tackle. We saw Jackson Powers-Johnson makes his NFL debut, kind of, shifts in there, that right guard, given Parham a breather, which AP said was just kind of part of the plan. It wasn't an indication of how Dylan was playing. He said more that was just the plan going into Sunday to get Jackson a little more acclimated to the NFL game there. But it's all of a sudden now, we were talking about it earlier, the depth of this team, the depth of both lines, the offensive line and the defensive line, now feels like it's being tested. And I think it's up to this Raiders coaching staff, it's up to the individuals in each of those rooms to say, hey, like, we might not be operating at full strength, but man, we're gonna have to pull together. We're gonna have to band together, because really the catalyst for everything that the Raiders want to do offensively and defensively, and this is not unique to them, it starts with the big boys up front, Fitz.
Yeah, and the hard part is we're seeing this happen. And you're right, the depth is being tested, and the depth was something we knew coming into the season wasn't necessarily a strength for the team. But we are seeing a historic level of depth being tested across the NFL so far this year. We are seeing injuries absolutely derail team after team after team. And it's astounding. It's astonishing. It'd be easy for the Chiefs to make excuses for why injuries are derailing their season. It'd be easy, even in a loss today, it'd be easy for the 49ers to turn around and say, yeah, but look at what we've been dealing without throughout the course of the season. Nobody cares. Like, at some point, you got to look at it and say, hey, the injuries, the issues that we're having, got to get them fixed, because it's impacting the entire league. This is not a Raiders problem. This is an NFL problem. So figuring out a way to get through these injuries, and there's no easy solution to it. Like, the loss of Malcolm Kuntz is a huge loss for this team. The loss like we said today, the fact that we didn't have 100% of Max Crosby is a huge loss for this team. And that all impacts Christian Wilkins. So, like, every injury impacts everybody else on these teams. I don't know that there's an opportunity to get healthy. So you're really going to need people to step up and step in.
Yeah, 100%. When we talk about it, throughout the course of preseason, where, you really need to be able to go 1 to 53 and that, end down to the 12, 13 guys on your practice squad too. Like, it's not just good enough in the NFL to be awesome from 1 to 22. Like, yeah, that's a good place to start, but it is not good enough if you want to have any type of sustained success, going into the latter part of the season, if you're that top heavy. And look, man, Raiders' depth is going to get tested, right? I mean, we knew it coming into this year. It's a war of attrition. Every team goes through in the NFL, but it happening a little earlier than we thought for your 2024 Las Vegas Raiders, and it's going to be a very, very interesting week here in the building. It's going to be a very interesting game a week from now as the Raiders return home, or I guess stay at home to take on the Cleveland Browns. But Fitz, before we go, and I really want to err on the side of not pretending that this was a good day, right? Objectively, it was not a good day. AP was very clear. This was not a good day. But if there's anything, I don't want to say that you can take positively out of it because, again, AP said, look, no positives. This was not an awesome day at the office. But, like, is there anything that you come out of today, any type of feeling where you say, okay, the Raiders, maybe this was just one really bad day at the, I know I'm kind of phrasing this oddly, but, like,
no, I got you.
Do you kind of get where I'm coming from a little bit?
Yeah, I think here's the one thing I would say. Now, I didn't have wild playoff domination hopes for this year. I had pretty reasonable expectations. If I played the schedule game a month ago, I would have picked the Raiders to be 1-2 after these 3 games. It wouldn't have been the way they got there, but that's where I would have picked them. And when you look across the AFC, let's also remember, we've seen slow starts every year for the Bengals. Last year, the Bills were left for dead because they didn't have the record people thought they should have after 8 weeks, right? So if there's any one thing that I do take away from this is part of the reason we're frustrated is because the core pieces of talent, I believe, are there. I believe that if you want to talk about on an average playoff caliber football team, would Devontae Adams start at wide receiver? Yes, I believe he would. Would Brock Bowers start? Yes, I believe he would. Would Max Crosby start? Of course he would. Would Christian Wilkins start? Of course he would. Has Jack Jones proven that he can be a number 1 corner on a playoff caliber football team? Yes, I believe he has. You see the emergence of Trey Tucker coming in and doing exactly what we know Trey can do, run deep routes. And they're within an inch of being able to complete some of these balls that these are the things that in a glorified preseason that September has become can work themselves out. This team is far from being good right now, but this team is also far from being bad. And I think the problem is we take every win as an indication that suddenly this team is on the same plane as the Bills and the Chiefs. And I think that's too big a leap coming into the season. Do I think that the Raiders could still shock the world and have a good season? Yes. I'm not going to turn around and say that this one loss undoes all the good that we saw from last week. I just think we have to figure out how to take the individual chess pieces and turn it into a really good team because that's what's not happening right now.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Trey. Doesn't mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. Career high in receiving yards and career high in receptions for Mr. Tucker. So, something to, I don't want to say build on, but at least something to say, hey, okay, we talked about those individual chess pieces, Fitz. Hey, this is a pretty good chess piece that Luke Getsy and the Raiders do have kind of at their disposal. Well, again, man, really hard to slice and dice it any other way than it was a really tough day at the office for the Silver and Black as they fall 36-22 to the Carolina Panthers. But the beauty of the NFL, we'll do it all again on Sunday. We'll overreact, positive or negative or somewhere in between to what we see a week from now. And that is just the nature of the beast. But again, the good news, it gives you and I something to talk about. So, Fitz, as is our tradition, where can the people find you and all the fun stuff that you are working on with our pals at Yahoo Sports?
Yeah, get out there and check out the Yahoo Sports app. Also, our YouTube page. Inside Coverage is our NFL show. We do a Sunday night reaction. We'll tape later tonight, also Wednesday and Friday. And then, of course, the College Football Power Hour every Tuesday and Saturday night. Get you all sorts of college football commentary on it, too. So be sure to get out there and check it out. I also put it out on my socials at Jason Fitz.
There he is. He's a busy man. He's a busy, busy man, and we appreciate him hanging out with us. So on that note, like we said, man, going to be an interesting week in the building. Going to be an interesting, 7 days until the Raiders go strap the pads on and do this thing again. And we will be with you every single step of the way. So, for Eddie Paskal, my man Jason Fitz, and everyone else at Silver and Black Productions, enjoy the week, Raider Nation, and we will see you guys next week. Same time, same place for our next episode of the Fifth Quarter, presented by Twitch.